This is Pressers by FedNet, the only podcast of news conferences from the United States Congress. House Democrats held a press conference in the recording studio on July 1st, a day after Speaker Johnson recessed the House early, but also a week after President Trump canceled a signing ceremony at the Capitol on the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. Nevada Congresswoman Susie Lee was followed by Gabe Vasquez from New Mexico, Andrea Salinas from Oregon, George Whitesides from California, Nellie Poe from New Jersey, Marcy Kaptur from Ohio, Dinah Titus from Nevada, Darren Soto from Florida, April McLean Delaney from Maryland, and Kim Schreier from Washington. The following material is protected by copyright.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm joined by several of my colleagues, many of them from battleground districts here, who are going to be traveling home later today. Literally, I know that I can speak to myself when I go back to my district and talk to my constituents. The level of despair and concern over rising costs, whether you're talking about gas prices because of the war in Iran, health care, groceries. But one item particularly sticks out, and I think we all share this commonality, is housing. I represent Las Vegas, Nevada, the 3rd District. In our state, and Clark County is facing one of the most severe housing crises in the country. In fact, we have the worst shortage of affordable rental units in the entire country. And let's just be clear, I think we can all agree that buying or even renting a home should not be out of reach for Americans. We should live in a country where one job should be enough to own a home, to afford health care, to afford a vacation once a year, to retire with dignity. And that's exactly what we've been fighting for. And in fact, Congress finally got it right. Over a week ago, we came together in a bipartisan manner to address an issue that is facing each one of us and our constituents, which is affordable housing. We were able to pass a bill that limits investors gobbling up housing. That's a key issue in southern Nevada, where 1 in 4 homes are not owned by Nevadans, but owned by investors. It releases more money for affordable housing, invests in manufactured housing, small dollar mortgages, and the bill even makes it easier for veterans to afford affordable housing. Yet this president is choosing to sit on this bill for over a week to make a political point. And we just have one very simple message. Do what the American people need and make housing more affordable and sign the bill. We don't need to show the American people dysfunction here in Washington. I mean, we're literally going home for a second week, a day early, because our counterparts could not bring bills to the floor to show the American people that we're serious about fighting and about working to make their lives more affordable. Yet this president is choosing to sit on this bill to make a political point, and we just have one simple message: sign the damn bill. And with that, I will turn it now over to Gabe Vasquez, who represents New Mexico's 2nd District.
Thank you so much, Susie. Thank you all for being here today. I represent New Mexico's 2nd District. It is one of the lowest per capita household income districts in the country. It's also one of the most affordable places, has been historically, to be able to afford a home. That's why New Mexico in my district has seen an influx of people moving from places in states where housing is incredibly expensive, retirees that want to make the most of their fixed income, young people who, whether they work at a gas station, a university, or the local restaurant, were able to afford an apartment or a home. That is no longer the case in my district. That is no longer the case across the country. The truth is, housing is out of reach for the working class, for just about everybody. And for once, Congress was actually able to get together in these last 3 years to pass one of the most significant and monumental bills in the history since I've been here that addresses this issue from a variety of different ways. And it's incredibly important that when we talk about the American dream, that it is not a dream, that it becomes a reality. And the way that becomes a reality for so many, the only way for Americans to build wealth in this country is to own a home, to have something to pass down to the next generation. I know that because in my own household, in my own family, that is the case. I bought my first home at 37, and it took me more than a decade of saving up enough money just to be able to afford a down payment to be able to buy that home. Just a few years later, I'm a few of the New Mexicans that are lucky enough to be able to have a mortgage that I pay for. That's not the case for many of the folks that I grew up with and went to school with, and that's not right. And so we're here today as proud Democrats, but more importantly, as Americans, asking the president to sign the damn bill, asking the president to listen to the people who elected him, asking the president to stop stalling and lower prices for American people, asking the president to listen to his party and his counterparts in the Senate and in the House and pass the 21st Century Road to Housing Act. The truth is this bill has overwhelming support. You heard it even from Speaker Mike Johnson just yesterday and before that he is eagerly awaiting for the president's signature. So I urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to put the pressure on the president to sign this important bill. Because the truth is this is the biggest win for housing affordability in a generation. Now, I will tell you in New Mexico, just for context, 1 in 6 homes is a manufactured home. That means whether you're a first-time home buyer or a retiree or somewhere in between, for so many, a manufactured home is their shot at the first house they will ever be able to buy, and for many people, the only house they will be able to buy. Now, this bill includes a provision that would lower the cost of manufactured homes. I recently visited a top manufactured home producer in Deming, New Mexico, and they told me directly that if this bill passes, it would shave off as much as $7,000 off the price of every single home that they build right there in New Mexico, eliminating a substantial part of a home that may cost a first-time home buyer somewhere around $90,000 to $100,000, which is incredibly affordable by today's prices. This bill also supports funding for the repair, the preservation, and the improvement of existing manufactured homes. It requires HUD to speed up production of new manufactured homes and improves FHA loans for manufactured homeowners. This is a big deal, again, for 1 in 6 New Mexicans that are relying on us and relying on this president to sign this bill. So it doesn't matter what your political party is. I think we can all agree that housing is too damn expensive, and hardworking Americans are asking for relief. They are demanding that the president sign this bill, and that's why we're here today. And the truth is, in this time where we are suffering economically, we are suffering from the decisions of this administration, that this is a small token to the American people that this president has so far refused to give to the American people, produced by this body in Congress. And so it's past time that the president signs this bill into law. Thank you so much. I'll pass it on now to my colleague, Andrea Salinas from Oregon.
Well, good morning. I am Andrea Salinas, and I proudly represent Oregon's 6th Congressional District. And thank you to Congresswoman Lee and the Battleground members for being here today. Right now, Oregon has 140,000 fewer homes than we need across the state. Right now, families in Salem, in my district, are figuring out how they can afford an average home price of $500,000 on an average income of $75,000. And right now, President Trump has a bill sitting on his desk that could change all of that. The question I want us all to ask today, why won't the president sign the bill? In 2024, President Trump and I both made a promise to voters. We could work to make life more affordable. Over the past 2 years, my colleagues and I up here have worked to do just that. If we want housing costs to come down, we have to build more housing. In Oregon, we need 440,000 additional homes over the next 2 decades just to keep up with demand. Communities across this country, whether they're urban, suburban, or rural, are facing the very same challenge. We don't have enough homes, and we need to build more. That's why the 21st Century Road to Housing Act does this. The bill won't solve every problem overnight, but it takes incredibly meaningful steps in the right direction to increase housing stock right now. It cuts unnecessary federal red tape that delays construction, which we're hearing from both the builders and potential home buyers. It gives communities more flexibility to build housing. It modernizes financing for affordable and manufactured homes, which remains one of the most affordable paths to home ownership for many Oregonian families. And it stops Wall Street investors from buying up single-family homes. These reforms help my communities, from Salem to Sheridan, Tiger to Newburgh, building more housing and bringing more homes within reach for hardworking families. This bill is about whether families can afford to buy their first home, whether seniors can stay in the communities they helped build, whether veterans and working families can find a place they can afford. This bill has passed Congress, both chambers. It's sitting on President Trump's desk right now. 2 years ago, Oregonians asked what we could do to lower their costs. Now they're asking why President Trump won't. Mr. President, sign the damn bill. Thank you. And I yield to my courageous colleague from California, George Whiteside.
Thanks so much. Let me say thanks to Congresswoman Lee for leading us in this effort. I'm proud to stand with my colleagues here to demand that the President sign the Road to Housing bill. In LA County, the average price of a house is now over $900,000. In Santa Clarita, where I represent, one of the cities that I represent, it's over $800,000. The average age of a first-time homeowner in the United States is now nearly 40 years old, just like you were saying. That is unacceptable. It means that a family today can't have a house before they start to have kids. They have to wait until their kids are almost in elementary school or maybe even junior high school. That is unacceptable, and we are failing the folks in our communities if we do not pass this bill. Young families, teachers, firefighters, nurses, the very people who make up the fabric of our community are getting priced out of home ownership. The core problem isn't that complicated. In my opinion, the core problem is supply, and this bill helps with supply. We need to build more homes. We need to build more apartments in order to drive down the cost of housing across the country. This bill will expand small dollar mortgages, clear away some of the obstacles that have made it too slow and expensive to build, and there are real steps to speed up construction of manufactured homes. This bill passed with bipartisan support. It's not often that Democrats and Republicans come together in this place that often, but when they do, we have to take full advantage of it. The president has called the bill unimportant, and this is a real quote, a big yawn. Well, housing is not a big yawn to folks in my district, and we are here to demand that the president sign this bill and get help to the American people. Thanks. And now I will turn it over to, let's see, Congresswoman Poe from New Jersey. Poe, sorry.
It's quite all right. Good morning, everyone. First, let me just also thank our Congresswoman Susie Lee for putting together this very important conference session. And good morning to each and every one of you. My name is Nellie Poe, and I represent New Jersey's 9th Congressional District. And while, as you all heard already, while the Republicans canceled votes, our Democratic colleagues are here present fighting to make housing a reality. Housing supply is not a political problem. It is not a regional problem. Lack of housing is an issue in cities. It's an issue in suburbs. It's an issue in rural communities. It's an issue in every single part of every single neighborhood throughout our entire country. It is a problem in blue states. It's a problem in red states. In my district and places like Paterson and Passaic, New Jersey, we need help. So when Americans cry out for political leaders to come together and find common sense solutions, they are talking precisely about issues like housing. And we are listening. We are absolutely listening. We have come together and passed the Road to Housing Act with an overwhelming majority. And our bill is standing on the tarmac because Donald Trump says addressing housing costs, as my dear friend Congressman Weisheimer said, a big yawn. Well, I don't know about any of you to hear it this morning, But yawning is definitely not the way I would describe the needs of housing anywhere throughout our country, and certainly that's an insult to all of us. And he is absolutely refusing to sign his name on this bill and make it a law. That is where we are, unable to enact real housing solutions because of a temper tantrum? Really? Think about that. Americans can certainly thank Donald Trump for failing to do his job. It's completely unacceptable, and every American should be outraged. I know that everyone throughout our country is listening here today, and I say, sign the damn bill, President Trump. Let's get this done. Thank you. I'd now like to have Congresswoman Val Voigt from Oregon, from District 4.
Thank you. Hi, Val Hoyle. I represent the 4th District of Oregon. Oregon is well represented here, both because, well, we're Oregon, so we show up. And also our housing issues and lack of housing and lack of affordable housing is extreme. You know, we all know that home ownership is a path to the middle class. And when my parents, when I was growing up, they could afford to buy a home on one salary. You know, we moved out of a manufactured home, they're called manufactured homes now, but to a home that my father was able to purchase with a GI loan on one salary. And now we have people working 3 jobs that can't afford to buy a home. In my district, I represent the central and south coast of Oregon, Eugene, and Corvallis as well. The majority of my district has a 0.5% vacancy rate. All along the Oregon coast, 0.5% vacancy rate. That means there aren't houses to buy or rent. Not low-income housing, not middle-income housing, not high-income housing. We had trouble recruiting a doctor in a rural hospital because there wasn't a house for him to buy or rent. That also means that we can't engage in economic development because there is no workforce housing. Look, this bill wasn't everything, but it was a lot. It meant that hedge funds, right, corporations couldn't come in and buy our housing to flip it for profit. What it meant was that we could expand manufactured housing. We could make housing less expensive. This is something the American people want. And you know what? Democrats, Republicans in Congress got together and actually did a bill that would have addressed these issues. Perfect? No, but truly transformational. This is what the American people are asking for. They're asking us to get to work, to do what's right for them. And this bill is sitting on the president's desk while we're being sent home from Mike Johnson because he can't figure out how to pass a bill over the floor. We need the president to sign the bill and do the work of the American people as opposed to having a petulant temper tantrum because he can't pass a voter suppression bill. The fundamental thing is this is for the American people. This is what they want. This is what we did. A lot of hard bipartisan work went into it, and we need that bill signed. It's the right thing to do. And with that, it is my great pleasure to first thank my colleague Susie Lee for organizing this and to introduce my very good friend, Marcy Kaptur.
First of all, thank you, Val, very much, and thank Congresswoman Susie Lee for bringing us together. And I'm really proud to stand with this group because we're actually working for a living. A lot of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have gone home, and frankly, I believe that their salaries should have deductions for the days that they're not here when there's legislation that needs to be passed, and to be part of a press conference like this supporting housing for the American people. I come from northern Ohio. It is both an industrial and an agricultural region. We are not a financial center. We are not a capital city. We make it or don't make it in the private market. And the reason I wanted to be here today is I'm old enough to remember when the United States had really thriving savings and loan associations. For the young people in the room today, you don't remember that, but there was an effort made to create special institutions to make home loans at the local level. And over the decades, what's happened is that those very, very important local accumulators of capital for housing have been diminished or completely eliminated. So housing was moved into the regular marketplace where it doesn't belong because it doesn't have as fast a return as if you sell a product. It just doesn't. And it takes up to 30 years for someone to pay off a loan and for that asset, the home, to actually increase in value. And a home is the average family's most important source of wealth. When the housing crash happened in 2008, the American people lost their equity. If you happened to be African American, you lost half of your wealth. If you were Latino, you lost about 40%, and everybody else about 30%. We still haven't recovered from that, and we haven't created the financial institutions we need to create local capital. What's happened is that the private equity companies have been encouraged to come into places like I represent, and I'm sure my colleagues as well, and buy up empty homes and flip them and put people in them that do not have the training, do not have the background to actually take care of what they're owning. And these absentee owners don't care. And so what's happening is in neighborhood after neighborhood, what we're seeing is a diminishment in the quality of neighborhood life. And it puts all the burden on the local mayors and the local departments of housing and community development, and it's totally unfair. But the root of the problem is buying a house is not like opening a bakery. It just isn't. It takes at least 30 years unless you're extremely wealthy. And for the younger generation now, my parents were able to get a home after they got married many, many years ago. It's the smallest house on the street. I still live in it. And it's a livable house. But in my neighborhood, there are several lots where what we need to happen is for the local city to have the capacity to come in, knock down the house that's deteriorated. If the foundation's still good, use it because you can save $50,000 on building a home. And we need to have the capacity to work with our local community development officers in the cities and counties and reuse some of this and create starter homes for the younger generation who cannot afford. Now you've got to be at least 40 years old before you own a home. That's twice as old as my parents were. And so it's really hard on the younger generations of our country to be able to even consider home ownership, even rent now. To try to rent something, it's so expensive, even in my area, which is not an expensive area compared to others to live in. So I so support this. I thought President Trump, when he came to office, because he'd been involved in housing in New York City, but I think mainly for the wealthy, so he really doesn't see. He doesn't see the kinds of neighborhoods that I live in. And he doesn't see why the financial system doesn't connect to it. And so we are here to urge the president on our 250th birthday to please sign the bill to make it easier for our people to own their own homes and to retool the neighborhoods that are salvageable in our country and to give people a chance, a leg up on the ladder of economic opportunity. So I assume that I have the responsibility of introducing the next speaker, and thank you all for coming today from a very different place in America than I represent. But one that my citizens travel to all the time, and that's Las Vegas, Nevada. Congresswoman Dina Titus, one of the most intelligent and hardworking members that I have the privilege to serve with. Thank you.
Marcy, thank you for saying that. Well, thank you so much. I do represent the heart of southern Nevada, and that includes such iconic places as Boulder Dam, the Sphere. I hope you visited the Sphere, the Las Vegas Strip. But a lot of people who live there work on the Strip or in some of these places. They work back of the house so their children can work in the front of the house. It used to be that you could sell a house in California, move to Nevada, buy 2 houses for half the price and have some left over for furniture. That is not the case anymore. Las Vegas, like all parts of the country, has just been hit so hard by the need for accessible, affordable housing. You know, the people in my district have suffered their lives and their livelihoods because of Trump's economic policies, going from capricious tariffs to this war of choice in Iran. It's higher grocery prices, it's higher gas prices, it's the cost of health insurance, the cost of child care, the cost of utilities. But probably the most egregious thing, the most unforgivable, the most inconceivable thing that he has done that's impacted their lives is refuse to sign this bipartisan housing bill. It's just up right in front of him, just laid on a silver platter, which, well, maybe he'd like it better if it was a gold platter, but it's there for him to sign, and he refuses to do it. Let me share some of the statistics with you of why this is so important in Las Vegas. Since 2020, housing prices have nearly doubled, and we have a shortage of approximately 80,000 affordable housing units. Now, there are many factors that go into the rising home prices, but it's hard to ignore the significant role of institutional investors. If you look at Las Vegas, since the Great Recession, almost 100,000 homes have been bought up by investors. And these aren't local investors. These are big LLCs and companies that exist in New York and in Texas primarily. They're swooping in, buying up these houses, and then flipping them and taking them off the market for average folks. Last year, I testified before the state legislature because they were considering capping the number of homes that investors could buy. And you're seeing this movement not just here at the federal level, but all around the country. So that's one of the reasons that I strongly support the 21st Century Road to Housing bill, because it includes that provision to look at institutional housing. As many of my colleagues have said, President Trump calls housing a boring topic compared to others and a big yawn. Well, the folks in my district aren't yawning because they don't have a roof over their head or a place to lie down and take a nap. So they can't be yawning. They know how critical this is, and we need to move on it. We've done it in Congress. The president needs to sign the damn bill. Thank you.
We'll now introduce Darren Soto from Florida.
Good morning, everyone. Homeownership is fundamental to the American dream, and with rising costs, the American people are losing faith. Last night I had a lowering cost town hall with nearly 10,000 constituents, and housing was one of the biggest issues that came up. We saw a gentleman who made about the median income in my district, which is about $80,000, wonder whether he and his family are going to be able to afford a home, which many times is $360,000 to $380,000 or more. I've heard from countless seniors wondering whether they're going to be able to live in dignity in their later years, and so many young people who have just given up on the idea that they're ever going to be homeowners. This is wrong. And we know in Central Florida the reasons why. While we have a lot of high-paying jobs in aerospace and space and healthcare, we also have a lot of folks in tourism who are struggling to make ends meet and struggling to be able to be into the middle class and to be able to own their own home. And so this is absolutely critical for a lot of those folks as they're going through and looking at their futures. This bill would help with a lot of things. First of all, the stopping these hedge funds from gobbling up all these different houses. This is a big issue in Central Florida. We had 40% growth in home values over the last 5 years, and rent has been the same way. And so here we have a major bipartisan housing bill that would stop this from happening. It also would help veterans. It would help streamline both environmental reviews and help with zoning laws, as well as help with manufactured homes, which in Florida we've seen great advancements in these. Many of them now are literally hurricane resistant and need to be a major part of the solution here. And so my message would be pretty clear. You know, this is not a snore. This is not a bore. This is a score for the American people. It's time to take the win, Mr. President, and sign this bipartisan bill and get something done in this otherwise dysfunctional Congress. And with that, I yield to Representative Delaney.
Good morning, everyone. 1 year ago, Republicans promised to make life more affordable with their big bad bill. And instead, today, families are paying even more for groceries, health care, and most especially housing that we are trying to address, where many big corporations and billionaires benefit from another tax break. I represent Maryland's 6th congressional district, and I hear a consistent message from all of my working families. They want to lower costs. They want to focus on issues that matter most, issues at the kitchen table, and of course where they lie their heads. My district includes some of the most expensive suburbs in the United States, just a few miles from D.C., and also parts of Appalachia. And it's why I crafted a cost-down, opportunity-up affordability agenda. I am focused on lowering everyday costs, but what I hear from my families across my district is that they need a place to live. That's why I proudly voted for the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, the most significant affordability package that our president calls a big yawn. But this bipartisan package would build more homes, would lower housing costs, and would expand housing ownership. In Maryland, since 2000 to 2022, home ownership qualifications and ability to buy has gone from 75% to 50%, and the average home cost is over $450,000. What I love about this bill, and what has been really especially important to my constituents, is in Western and Mountain Maryland, where many community banks finance a lot of housing and other small loans. The additional access to capital through this new legislation will be very critical. Also, most of my constituents are very, very excited about corporations being banned from taking so much housing stock away. President Trump, as my colleagues have said, could sign this today, but he's choosing his ego over housing affordability and his political interests over American families. We need to lower costs and not make political gains. And as we celebrate America's 250th birthday, we should remember that we are always made this country strong by expanding opportunity for hardworking families and making it easier for them to keep a roof over their head, put groceries on the table, and access health care. I'll keep fighting for my constituents, and I hope that the president will soon sign this bill. Thank you.
And now we'd like to introduce Kim Schreier from Washington.
Thank you, Representative Lee. And thank you to all my fellow members of Congress and the Senate for joining together and today here to put pressure on the president to sign the bill that we all voted for this week that will make housing more affordable. We all know our country is facing an affordability crisis, especially when it comes to housing. Housing is so expensive right now that the average age of a first-time home buyer is 40. And it's even older in Washington state, where I live. We need solutions, especially now, as prices of gas and groceries and healthcare are also skyrocketing. Last week, Congress finally agreed on a big housing bill that would cut red tape and ramp up construction and build rural housing and build veteran housing and make it easier to afford a place to live, whether you rent or you own. And what did this president do when presented with this bill to address one of Americans' biggest concerns? He refused to sign it. Why? Pure blackmail. He won't sign the bill to make it easier to buy a house until he can pass a separate and totally unrelated bill that will make it harder for people, especially married women, to vote. Why would he want to do that? It's unbelievable. And it's un-American, and it's out of touch, and it sure sounds like yet another way that this president is putting his own interests above the interests of the American people. I will continue to advocate for the final passage of this bipartisan housing bill to give Americans some security at a very insecure and unstable and difficult time. And I am happy, I think, at this point, to turn this back to Representative Lee. Thank you for convening us today.
Thank you. Oh, okay. We can take any questions. Yeah.
Hi. So as Purple District members, what's the first thing you want to see a Democratic majority, if you guys do take the House, do on housing?
Does anyone want to pipe in? Listen, I mean, we were able to pass this bipartisan bill. I think the most important thing that we should be doing, especially in a state like mine, assuming it doesn't get passed this cycle, is permitting reform. I represent a state that has 90% federal land, and being able to streamline permitting from concept to shovel in the ground, it's about 7 years for a developer to bring a housing project online. This bill is being held up primarily because Republicans refuse to acknowledge that all sources of energy should be treated equally. And so I think that would be a key first step to assisting us, especially in a state like mine. I know other people may have other ideas, but that's a big issue. And I'm assuming, the president and this administration has dug in to really put their fingers on the scale against solar and wind energy. And that's a big stumbling block for us to get that key piece of legislation, which, by the way, has bipartisan agreement across both chambers, but that's really what's holding that bill up. Is anyone else?
There's some important provisions in this bill as it relates to private equity buying up housing stock across the country. I think one of the largest frustrations for the middle class and working class districts like many of ours is the continued influence of big money in the lives of Americans. And I think when it comes to housing, it's a very personal issue for families. And getting private equity firms and hedge fund investors to realize that the future of Americans doesn't belong on their balance sheet is really important to our constituents. They want to see Democrats restore some power to the middle class and restore some dignity to the value of hard work in this country. And that is what we are seeing in places like New Mexico, one of the lowest income states in the country, one of the poorest financially states in the country, is that private equity firms are looking at us like ripe opportunities for investment. And that has got to stop. That has got to be part of the agenda. And there's many things that can be strengthened as part of the Democrats' housing affordability plan to target private equity in particular. Because we've got to make sure that first-time home buyer has a solid shot at buying a home. And right now, that is far, far out of reach for most New Mexicans.
I know for Oregonians, the big concern that I constantly hear, and it is a huge barrier to housing, is infrastructure. Whether it's water infrastructure or energy infrastructure, we don't have it, and we keep asking for these one-offs. We have sewer pipes that are wooden, that are leaking water all over the place, and we cannot build communities without that infrastructure. And these are some of the things that President Biden and a previous Congress before I got here tried to achieve and Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act. That has all been rescinded under President Trump. We need those infrastructure dollars to make sure that our communities can actually build that housing.
Sure, go. No, go.
I just wanted to add, three of us come from Western states with a lot of forestry, and I can't not mention the cost of building materials. And we have these dual problems. In the West, we have catastrophic forest fires. We also have a lot of timber. We also have a Forest Service that is understaffed right now. And if we could get the Forest Service staffed up and to do its job to thin our forests, remove the smaller diameter trees, turn those into cross-laminated timber. It is as strong as steel. We should be using that to sequester carbon, to build more houses, to do it more affordably. And that is a great circular economy that will bring down the cost of housing.
I'd like to follow on that, if I could. I didn't know I had another lumber friend in town. I represent both urban and rural areas, but Toledo, Ohio is a city where we brought $6.5 million to plant 10,500 trees. We've had massive storms. Lots of trees have come down. Trees have aged out. I mean, oak trees and maple trees and black walnut trees, you name it. And I just asked for money to buy a sawmill for our forestry division in the city, because I said working with Habitat for Humanity and tasking some of our religious organizations, inviting them to participate. If each one adopted one lot and one house, we could make progress if we had some of the tools. So I had no idea you were interested in that. So I'm glad I came to this press conference, not just to say, please, President Trump, sign the housing bill. You're a houser. Do it for the country. But to say that we can build housing. And so I'm with you on that. And our city people, okay, I got a lot of carpenters in the countryside, and I've got union carpenters. But we don't really train very many people in cities to be carpenters. Maybe one school or two schools we have that try to teach the building skills, but we could turn it into a workforce development program. So I think we have an idea to be born here beyond the legislation that we all urge the president to sign. Thank you for letting me comment.
All right, one more and then we'll take, you want to after? Yeah. What time?
We have the room till 10.
Oh, okay.
The only thing I'd add is I think we need a national Apollo program for housing, and that means a whole of government effort to build at least 3 million units within 2 years and 6 million units within 4 years. That's the kind of scale that we're going to need to actually make a dent in this problem. And then there are a whole bunch of individual policies within that. I think we need to have advanced purchase commitments to drive down the cost of manufactured housing by 50%. That is totally doable. The cost of actually making housing has not been reduced over the past 50 years to actually build housing. We have to drive that cost down. And then we need to provide creative financing mechanisms so that we can build a lot.
First, end the tariffs. We've seen 25% increases in both lumber prices and granite in Central Florida. I've heard directly from the Port of Canaveral. Second, it would be helpful not to deport the entire remaining workforce that we're seeing in Florida. When I talk to local builders, they struggle to find workers. So ending TPS and some of these other programs are absolutely hurting the construction industry in Central Florida. And then we need FEMA reform. The replacement cost is only $250,000. It's hard to replace a home in Florida for that amount. And then property insurance. We could use a national catastrophe fund, much like what we see modeled after the flood insurance fund, that would help with downward pressures on property insurance, which is very, very expensive in Florida. So all of those things would help out with housing costs in our area.
All right. And Minnie, this is for you. We need to pass the lands bill. That's a very hyper-local issue.
If you had to pick one provision of this bill that will do the most to make housing more affordable for your constituents, which would it be?
Coming from a community that 1 in 4 homes is owned by an institutional investor, we've seen pressure of rents and prices go up when they either flip the homes or they jack up rental prices. So controlling that, that's why I was a co-sponsor of the Home Act, which is partly included in this. I think that's a key provision. And then, of course, just making the home investment funds more available, reducing the income levels so more people can afford the smaller mortgages will be important. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. Appreciate it. Thanks to all the members. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie.
Thank you.
This program is provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast.